We'll call this meeting to the public hearing to order. Can you please stand for the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call.
Ms. Dong?
Here.
Mr. Taylor?
Here.
Ms. Hernandez? Ms. Nunez?
Here.
Ms. Quintero?
Present. Can I have approval of the agenda?
We approve the agenda as submitted?
I second the motion.
Roll call.
Ms. Dong?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Aye.
Ms. Nunez?
Aye.
Ms. Quintero?
Aye. Thank you. Information?
Ms. Quintero, President Quintero, members of the governing board, members of the audience, I'm going to ask if, I know Mr. Baca, Mr. Costello, and Ms. Sutter come up. The purpose of this instructional time model is that there's a new House Bill 2862 that was approved by our legislators over the last session, which allows flexibility in instructional time models to give schools the ability to create models where students can attend remotely for parts of the day, and we do not lose average daily membership for that. So this public hearing is just to introduce the two models, instructional time models, that we'd like to present to the governing board for questions, and then we'll have another public hearing and open up for public hearing as we return next week for approval. I'll go ahead, Mr. Vaca.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes, President Quintero, members of the board. As Mr. Holmes mentioned, the HB 2862 requires two public hearings prior to any adoption. So this is public hearing number one. We will give a quick overview of what the instructional time models look like. We'll bring it back at the next board meeting on the 10th of August for any other additional questions or public input. And then submit a recommendation to the board for their adoption of the approved model. As a broad overview, it allows districts to adopt an ITM, an instructional time model that provides flexibility. And in our case, the flexibility that we're most highlighting is remote learning, because under normal circumstances, absent last year's executive order, you cannot receive state funding for remote learning. But this adoption of the instructional time model will allow us to report up to 50% remote learning without loss of funding. If we exceed 50% of remote learning, so some worst case scenario happens where we have to be on a very prolonged closure or remote learning posture, then we face that loss of 5% of the funding, just like an AOI is lost. Any students who are enrolled in AOI are already reduced funding by 5%. We receive 9% of the traditional funding for those students. So that we're here on this first meeting, this first public hearing, to give an overview. One of the requirements is similar to the way we managed attendance tracking last year. We will incorporate the same expectations and guidelines to our staff to record any type of remote learning will be recorded so that we can quickly identify that the student for this day was in a remote session versus an in-person session. And that's an important aspect of the instructional time model expectation. And we do have an AOI, SOSA, but this is not the AOI. I just want to draw a distinction between what we're recommending. This is for our traditional in-person classrooms. It gives us some flexibility, so that's the benefit, and Ms. Utter will speak to kind of one of the options and how we can be flexible. So there's some positives in the sense of making additional options available to students who might be able to take advantage of a remote learning opportunity, and we'll dive into that. So we have two models that we're describing, and I need to also remind that our standard instructional time model is just regular in-person learning. There's no, so that always is our default, and we're going to continue to operate with that expectation and hope that we can just continue to operate schools like we've always done prior to having to operate remote learning. But our general description, our general category is that if we do need to move into a remote setting due to some circumstance like an outbreak on a campus, maybe COVID related or maybe not COVID related, we still can use this if there were school closure due to, flooding, for example, and any other, this will allow us to take advantage of the instructional time model that says, okay, we can switch into remote learning mode. So as it's written, you want to create a seamless learning experience. So we'll kind of, now what we want to emphasize is that our hope is that we can avoid doing this, but this gives us the flexibility to maximize funding of our school year should we have to go into that situation. So a scenario is standard classes Monday through Friday. Our class times are going to vary according to the instructional hour requirements that are required by grade level by year. So that's in statute, and we'll make sure that our standard schedules meet those expectations. But if we have to switch into this model, the remaining instructional time may be in a remote setting, and that's what we're asking the board to ultimately approve upon the second hearing. And the governing board is authorizing the district to say you can provide remote learning, and you can report so to the state and request to be fully funded for up to 50% of that remote learning. We will meet or exceed all instructional minute requirements, and we will align all of our attendance policies to conform to this model that we're requesting to be approved. In a more specific sense, and Ms. Utter was able to kind of conceive of some options and some flexibility and brought it to Mr. Castellum and us, and we were able to look at it more specifically and how this may be an option. And so I'd like to invite Ms. Utter and Mr. Castellum if you want to speak to this too, and she can kind of clarify how this would give us some additional flexibility with this secondary model that we're proposing.
Can I go backwards on the slides and do the CTE one first?
Oh, well,
No?
that is the CTE one right there.
Okay?
Yeah, that's the one. And then we have that. Oh, if you want to go to that one right there?
Yeah,
Okay.
because it has really great pictures of our kids. As many of you know, we are talking about Sunnyside's budget here with the alternative proposal. But CTE classes are a little different, the JTED classes, because we can also yield an additional 0.25 through the PIMA JTED. So when this opportunity came up, and given the fact that, to their credit, CTE teachers did not want to lose kids last year. So whether students were chose to stay home, be back C, and learn remotely or come in, they were doing both. They were juggling both. So we're in a position right now where we have teachers who have a lot of their curriculum that are already able to be delivered in a remote setting. But the major reason to be in a CTE class is because you want to have the hands-on experience. You want to be working in the lab. So longer periods work better for CTE classes in terms of being able to get them in the lab and get a lot done. So the example for some of our CTE classes that we're going to be running will be to offer some 7th period classes at Desert View and Sunnyside, like auto technology and digital photo, where on Mondays and Tuesdays, students from anywhere in the district, or frankly from out of the district, could register to take that class and learn from home on Mondays and Tuesdays with that remote curriculum that they have to do, and then come in once a week on Thursdays for a 3-hour block. So our auto teacher has already worked with Mr. Smith and are looking at trying to do some hands-on work with servicing the white fleet in this manner as well. And then if these are students who aren't in another CTE class, we'll be able to yield the additional 0.25 for them as well. So working backwards from that, we had also taken a proposal for our high school students, because we know we ran a robust summer school program, but we also have some students whose grades were not where they wanted them to be last year, who are either repeating classes that they didn't pass, or in some cases, repeating a class that they didn't do as well in as that they wanted to do. And so to provide additional flexibility for them, we felt like we could offer some 7th period classes so that they weren't doing a totally online class where they didn't have an awful lot of additional support, so that there would be a teacher with them to be able to take those classes partially in person, partially online as well. So learning from what we had available last year and bringing it forward into a model that we think will actually be of great service to our students, and in some situations we'll be able to yield additional revenue for those students as well. Mr. Baca, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sutter. So those are the general descriptions of these instructional time models that we're proposing. We haven't received the instructions from ADE are those instructions from ADE that specify how to submit the instructional time model per se in its, all the specifics. So we're waiting patiently for those instructions, but we're still bringing this forward so that we can have, implement this as quickly as in the school year as possible. And
I don't know how to turn it off. I don't know how to turn it off. Sorry, remember I told you
Yes,
I was
you
having
did
trouble
tell
with it before the meeting started. I don't want to turn it all the way off, but it's a new phone and I was having trouble.
Great. Hit it on the table. Hit it really hard.
Take it to the room.
Just go put it in the bathroom.
Put it in there and close the door.
So I wasn't the only one who I think I can do it.
The volume wasn't responding to me.
Now, how can I turn it all the way off?
Off.
Oh, yeah. Sorry about that. I was telling Becky, I can't figure out. I think I have it off. Here, I'll put it back there.
Yeah.
At least the volume's off.
It won't switch me to the window that's playing, so.
We need a CTE class on phones.
I think it's on.
Okay. Where did we leave off?
Sorry.
The state has informed us that they'll provide a template for us to submit the instructional time model, and they're expecting it to be submitted by the end of August. But we are trying to get in front of that as quickly as possible so that we can implement these options, especially the flexibility options, as early as possible in the school year. A lot of the design that was implemented in our distance learning plan is kind of the same, roughly the models in terms of how we would provide remote learning if we had to switch into a more general sense remote learning configuration. But again, as I mentioned, this is something that we hope to avoid. It's just now the state will allow us to approve this and to maximize funding, not lose funding for up to 50%. Anything above 50% would be funded at that 95% level. So this is a public hearing. I think just in terms of compliance with the expectation from House Bill to allow this opportunity for any public input. So I would suggest we provide an opportunity if anyone of the public needs to provide input. But other than that, any questions that the board may have, and we'll be back here in another board meeting to have a similar discussion.
Yes, Mr. Holmes, did you have something? No. Anybody have any questions at this time?
When I first started seeing this, it looked so complicated. I mean, it really looked complicated, but it looked like, as usual, the staff here, your staff, Mr. Holmes, has done an excellent job in making sure that this complicated new thing is utilized in the best way possible for our students. So I just want to thank all of you that have worked on this, and it looks like a great plan. So I just want to say thank you.
You make things easy to understand, so thank you.
Thank you.
Shall we have a motion to adjourn?
Move that we adjourn?
I second the motion.
Roll call. Ms. Dong?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Aye.
Ms. Hernandez?
Oh, yeah.
Ms. Nunez?
Aye.
Ms. Quintero?
Aye. We will return it. Okay, and let's have a minute. Okay, we'll call this meeting to order. It's like for a regular school board. Will you please stand for the salute to the flag, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Ms. Dong?
Here.
Mr. Taylor?
Here.
Ms. Hernandez? Ms. Nunez?
Present.
Ms. Quintero?
Present. can I have approval of the agenda?
I move that we approve the agenda as submitted.
Second the motion.
Roll call?
Ms. Dong,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Aye.
Ms. Hernandez? Ms. Nunez?
Aye.
Ms. Quintero?
Any governing board comments today? Mr. Taylor?
I have a few. I just want to wish everyone a wonderful first week back next week. We won't see you all until the week after that. And I just want to thank you all for helping make this happen. I know first week is difficult, probably even more difficult under these circumstances. So I appreciate everything you all have done to get us here. And I also want to encourage everyone, if you haven't already been vaccinated, to head over to Sunnyside or Desert View on Thursday and Friday from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. It's super accessible now, super easy to get vaccinated. There's almost no excuse. Thank you.
No one else? Actually, I would just like to say thank you to everybody who participated with the new teacher orientation. It was so great. It was wonderful and to see all these happy new faces, and I hope they stay. I just, this is going to be a fun and adventurous new year, and we're going to be flexible and brave and kind, right? So thank you. Superintendent's report.
Yes, absolutely. President Quintero, members of the governing board, members of the audience. I want to start by saying congratulations again to Audrey Jimenez. She just continues to amaze us all. So Audrey Jimenez from Sunnyside High School wrestling team has brought home a bronze medal from the 2021 Cadet World Championships in Budapest, Hungary. Of course, she represented the year before. This is Audrey's second international medal. She won the gold in the 2019 Pan Am Games, and just congratulations to her for representing us so well. She's a 4.0 student, so great academically as well as just in the sports. Congratulations to Coach Leon, who actually accompanied her to the training facilities as well with the family, and so it's great to have our coach really kind of pushing the competitive level at the international field as well. So Audrey, thank you for representing as well in the Sunnyside Wrestling program. Also want to, again, to our welcome back. We hosted a successful new teacher orientation last week, so I would like to welcome all the new teachers to our wonderful district at Sunnyside. We have been busy gearing up for the start of the school year, and so many events and activities in the last few weeks, but very excited to see our students next week on August 4th. I want to wish everyone a great start, and we have our kickoff with all teachers returning tomorrow, starting at 8 a.m. at Sunnyside High School. 2 events there, and then over at Desert View as well. So we're splitting it up into 3 events just to kind of keep things a little bit less crowded, with the opportunity to just launch in the right way, a little bit of humor, a little bit of excitement, and hopefully some motivation as we enter our 2021 100th year as a district. Thank you. That concludes our report.
We have no recognitions? Call to the audience. We have any cards? No. Motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move we approve the consent agenda as submitted.
I second the motion.
Roll call?
Ms. Dong,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Aye.
Ms. Hernandez?
Aye.
Ms. Nunez?
Aye.
Ms. Quintero?
Aye. Opening of school report.
Go ahead and get the go ahead and get us started and then kind of ask some folks to join us as we have kind of questions on certain areas. As you know, we're starting the school year next week. One of the things that I like to bring forward to the governing board always kind of where our mitigation efforts lie, right? And that's important. There's some challenges with this particular school year because there are some things that are no longer under our control, even though there's, different opinions on certain things. And I think this is our best attempt of keeping us safe, given what we have control over as a district and what we find to be the health standards that we're seeing across our nation, and then more importantly, our local consulting with our Pima County Health Department as well. And so this has been definitely vetted through them. As you all know, that the later mitigation includes mask, hand washing, social distancing, and when available, testing, right? That's, I think, a really important, so that's kind of the 4 areas that really we've had broad discussion on to put into place. Of course, the mask mandate that was in place prior, sorry, kind of stuck, like I think everything maybe not advancing. As you know, state legislators do not allow districts now under legislation to mandate masks, right? Or to mandate any kind of vaccinations as well. So what we have available to us is the language we use and the modeling we do as a district, right? Which is to continually strongly recommend the use of masks and to model the necessary protocols that even more recently CDC has asked for vaccinated folks in schools to wear masks, right? And we can't mandate it. I know that's very clear. We know that parents have choice and adults have choices. But as long as we kind of continue to model the expectations for our folks, I know our district and I know our staff and I know our students, a lot of them are going to do what's best for themselves, right? In the ways that are much more altruistic. And so we have masks available for students that forget or they need one or want one. But especially indoors where this is something that we're going to continue to strongly recommend. We have new signs that we put out where it shows that we're strongly recommending use of masks. That's going to continue to be posted along with our asking to frequently wash your hands and more importantly try to social distance when possible, right? So when it comes to hand washing, we do have adequate supplies in our schools. We will still continue the portable hand washing stations at our elementary schools as well. There's some of them that were kind of functionally not as working, but they got all those working. We're going to continue to clean and sanitize the bathrooms, but hand washing along with kind of the use of sanitizers are still appropriate, right, to kind of use during this time and continue to kind of model that and make that a really important part of our layer mitigation strategies, right? So hand washing is super important. We also, social distancing, and this is where we're still going to continue to encourage the social distancing of 3 feet, right? It's going to be a bigger challenge as we open school this year because we have a lot of students coming back, right? And a lot of students that want to participate in a full educational setting, parents who struggle with their students at home, and equally important, the students struggling at home. And so we still have a lot of students coming in and modeling and teaching these protocols of social distancing. This is going to be certainly a larger challenge for us when we have classrooms sometimes that are real difficult to keep that apart, right? But the big issue right now is how many students actually are going to come wearing masks, right? And that's an unknown variable to us, right? And so that's one of the things that we'll continue to model, teach, make sure that social distancing is something that we want to keep in place. And we're going to keep our disinfecting protocols, right? Those are, we've purchased, right? We have made a big investment in those 360 Clorox machines that will still continue to be used for deep cleaning every evening. We've got the disinfectants that we know have worked on viruses, although, as we know, we're also trying to maintain a science behind everything, and we know that from surfaces, we're not passing that, right? But still keeping cleanliness protocols will help in general to reduce any kind of just keeping clean, right? That's such an important part, and it makes us a better district. We are in our playground and common areas, continue to keep those actually clean. One of our schools has been very helpful in modeling with other schools, sharing their protocols, particularly as they're trying to keep kids together in the playgrounds, right? So that we don't split all these cohorts up, particularly with the little ones. So that's some of the management pieces that have been good practices that we can put in place as well. And we currently are in the process of changing all our water fountains to the refillable, right? As you know, they've become very popular, so they're en route, right? But they're not going to get here before school starts, even though they've been ordered, right? So for right now, every school does have at least one or two, depending on the size of the school available. And we're going to continue to encourage people to bring their waters and fill them up versus kind of continue to kind of use those until we completely change them out over time, right? And the estimated time of arrival is probably the second week that we start. And then it becomes the installation process that we're going to have to do. I just want to be real candid with those that are listening, that they've been ordered, they're coming, but again, not going to be here on time, right? Like a lot of stuff.
Ms. Hernandez.
I have a question before I forget. You mentioned that there are some schools that are modeling safety protocols. Is there a reason why we're not using what they're doing in ours, or are we?
Yes, we are. So let me make sure I was clear. That was a great follow-up question. Yeah, so they've been sharing, right? So principals have been sharing those good practices. Part of the detail work is what I'm discussing, right? So what does that look like on the ground is what's been shared. I know Ms. Gallegos has shared in her principal report those plans, and so all these schools are modeling after these schools that we know have done a really good job over time. Everyone did a good job, don't get me wrong, but there's ones that understand the management of this a lot better, right? That you guys know, and so those are the ones that we know, okay, hey, if you're stuck on what that looks like, follow this plan from this school.
Thank you.
You're welcome, great question. So we are limited also campus visitors, only when absolutely necessary. Parents will report to the front office that they need to come pick up their student for any reason. We'll continue to encourage the use of masks, and we'll keep logs, right, of any visitors that will come in. And when I think I'm visitor, I'm not talking about people who are coming in the classrooms. I'm talking about visitors that have to be there for a specific reason, right, that are there because they have to pull a child, talk to someone, right, and those types of events. We are continuing to encourage virtual meetings. It's become a standard. A lot of our parents like those, and I think that's always a good standard. I think we've learned a lot from that space that allows us to take advantage of the technology that's out there. I think we talked about that early on, how some of our exceptional education parents really enjoyed, and I know Dr. Williams has done a lot with that, and it's meeting IEP needs without having to try to work around people's schedule has been outstanding. With food service, we will continue to service our every student now, according to the federal guidelines, will qualify for free and reduced lunch, right? So that will continue. So the challenge is going to be for us getting the free and reduced lunch applications in, because we still need to collect those. But if everyone's eating free, that's going to be one of those. I don't have an incentive, right? So we're just going to have to work with schools, making sure we get those in place as we're because they have funding implications for us long term, right? So we ask parents still continue to fill those out. We're pushing it during registrations and making sure we get those. But hot lunches will be served, right? But we're not going to have salad bars where you have students actually going and grabbing a bunch of stuff, right? They're going to be minimized menus to keep the flow of the traffic going smoothly and not bottlenecking, right? Where we have a lot of kids who aren't able to social distance because you've got move it along, and certainly making sure that we still continue our grab and go for breakfast. That's been a successful model. They grab their bag and can still eat there, and we've been feeding a lot of students in that regards. With transportation specifically, we're definitely continue to push the use of face coverings, social distancing. We're encouraging parents that can drive their students to school, because we want to minimize the amount of students on the buses, right? And I know that's a challenge for certain parents. I know we're working with our transportation department. I know with Mr. Encina's, there's like new regulations that allow us to reimburse parents, right, for certain students who are able to transport them. So we're looking into that law, and I believe it's specific to special needs students. So I know Mr. Encina has been working with our transportation department. I believe they're meeting this week to kind of figure out how we can minimize, again, number of students on buses, given the fact that we've got some incentives specific for special needs.
Ms. Hernandez.
Just out of curiosity, around, I don't know who can answer, but around how many students obviously
Great
we're
point.
closed for some time, but around how many students are in a bus? I know that can change, but.
Yeah, our ridership in general ends up being, God, do you know off the top of your head, Hector? I used to know this number.
But I guess my question is, are we still getting a lot of students who are riding the bus? or are they half empty?
It- The majority of our buses are not full,
Okay.
but we do have certain routes that are always traditionally full, right? Those are the ones that are always packed and we have to double up. For the most part, you're not gonna see that. You're gonna see the full buses though in the high schools and middle is where we see the most packed, and usually not at the elementary level. I'll give you an example. Challenger, when the buses that go out to pick up, or in San Javier, tend to be fairly packed. If I'm correct, I know Mr. Badia out there. I know there's a couple routes to go to Desert View that are coming from that Challenger area that are super packed as well. But other than that, most of the ridership is not a full bus.
And are we doing anything as far as ventilation? I know obviously we can't install new ventilation systems inside our buses, but are we opening windows or what are we doing?
AC units are being turned on. Windows will be open when if the climate allows that. And as far as the capacity, it's an 84 passenger bus. Normally, high school students, 2 to a seat, roughly means 56 kids in a school, at a full school bus, with high school students and middle school students.
Yeah, so in terms of ventilation, we will continue to open the windows so at least we have breeze running through, even though we have the AC running, right? That becomes a challenge. I don't think we're looking at efficiency right now. I think it's, I know I've ran my AC with my windows down too, so I think we just gotta look at keeping things cool at the same time, trying to practice some good, particularly where the buses are full.
And is that being communicated to the department?
We'll make sure that that's clear, yeah.
My concern is our bus drivers
Mhm.
who have to transport so many students. I just want to make sure that everyone's staying safe.
You got it. We'll communicate, Mr.
Obviously,
Encina.
we're very limited. There's
Yeah.
no masks required, and that's a concern.
No, but communication needs to be clear. I got it.
We'll discuss that on the pre-service day for our drivers.
Okay,
Part of the-
perfect.
Thank you.
Miss,
On the buses that are traditionally full, is there gonna be any type of spacing or would it be?
Two to a seat, sometimes they get to 3, but we're limiting to 2 to a seat. So there may be time, this is one thing this is why we're asking if we can encourage more pickup, those that can, because we'll have to double up routes, right? In other words, do your drop off, come back, pick up, right? Which is not very efficient because they have to go somewhere else, but it's gonna be how we're gonna have to work through certain things, at least this year.
And on that topic,
Yeah,
do that.
that's good.
Are we also communicating with our staff and teachers to be more flexible with our students because of we don't know where they're coming from,
That's
how
a
they're
great
getting to school?
Yes, so that's a great point. So I'll ask Ms., I know as we're moving, particularly at the high school, that's where the biggest concern lies with tardiness, because that's where the dominoes happen. I'll ask Mr. Gaston to make sure that's.
We make announcements as buses come late. There's an email that goes out, and it's a practice we've had in place for a long time. Where they'll say, for example, hey, bus 131 just arrived, please allow your students in. You know, so.
Unfortunately, late buses are not just new to COVID. It's been a big issue. So, but to your point, I don't want students to be penalized because, we're trying to double up, particularly as we're trying to get back to school. So let's make sure that's clear. I know Ms. Sheppy's here as well, so we can work on communicating those pieces. And Mr. Badia can also help us specifically where we've got some chronic tardy was coming from San Javier, particularly when we have the rains. So I know in his new role, he can help articulate and help navigate some of those tardy students, but great points.
I have one more question. So asking parents to drop off their kids is great. However, some schools have a problem with too many cars down certain streets in front of the schools. So how are we dealing with the overflow issue in traffic in front some of those streets?
Well, the issue really, those schools have always been a problem.
Right.
Right, and so they've got less than stellar, right, egress, and those will continue. I think what we're talking about are some of these one-off situation places where traditionally haven't been drop-off, they've been bus schools,
Right.
right? And so in those cases, we haven't seen the type of issues that we have like in the traditional Mission Manors, right, which is a cluster because they're not a bus school too.
Right.
Right, so when we talk about the bus schools, we certainly don't anticipate the type of issues that we've had in those schools because of the way the traffic is serviced, right? So I'm thinking like the Craycrofts, the Lawfers, where there's a little bit better pattern, right? Not perfect, but a little bit better pattern. The Esperanza already is more of a walking school as well. So there's not tons of them that we're talking about. So we're just gonna have to work with kind of traffic control. But it's not as big as a concern as I have right now as we're encouraging it, because those schools that already have problems are the ones that we have problems with no matter what.
Okay. Is the parking lot ever gonna get done before school?
It will. We had to go back and rebid because that traditional contractor has not responded. So we're going back and rebid the asphalt. But it's still in the works.
Okay.
It's been approved, and now we have to go back and rebid it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Taylor.
No,
Have we hired
sorry.
have we hired any new bus drivers?
We have. I think even last week we hired four.
Have we considered on those busy routes to, instead of coming back and doing 2 buses?
So the challenge right now is still finding enough drivers, to be honest with you. So yes, so that's certainly we've thought about it. I think part of our as we look at ridership coming back, we always make modifications. So depending how things go that first week, if we see ridership down, right, this particular year, then I can repurpose, like I condense a route and then repurpose a driver or that. But probably won't be able to do that until we see that first week, only because we don't. Everyone right now is like, how can I say? Everyone's really challenged with bus drivers, and so therefore it's like picking in from each other, right, and pillaging from each other. So
Okay. Yeah, I only ask, and on top of a pandemic, on top of our mitigation strategies, and to throw some more work on you.
no, that's what we do. We troubleshoot.
I also want us to consider, sustainability too. Having more cars out on the road, having parents take their kids to school, it does take its toll on our beautiful environment, and public transportation is obviously the best way to lower our carbon emissions and whatnot. So that's why I ask.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think the more we can be creative with public transportation, I know we've been working with city officials to see if SunTran could play a more prominent role with some of our pickup. We just haven't gotten there yet because some of the routes haven't really kind of transpired, but that's a continued dialogue that I'd like us to continue to explore.
Is TUSD working with SunTran right now?
They are the advantage that they have in being able to do that is because they have these centralized routes that they're able to take that go really into the city. Our challenge is, you got number 8, right, that goes out here, and then you get the Valencia one. But then it gets tricky once you get in past Valencia and how you get kids all the way to Valencia without a transfer, right? So that's there's not a lot of transfer points that are accessible for us outside of the one that's right by Star, right? So that's I think our biggest challenge is getting kids to a hub, where in TUSD they can actually take a regular bus to the hub, and then that hub goes to SunTran, and that's a little bit different in how they work it.
Okay.
And then I have air quality. As you know, we've invested in needlepoint bipolar ionization. Gotten to know that term. I just remember our conversation. I'm looking at Mr. Hernandez with it. I read this article, and so it says, so there's these, these new technology, right? And this was kind of the best we've invested in what we thought at the time, right? And it continues to be something that is being touted and used. I know Ms. Beauvais has been instrumental in trying to meet our timeline. I'm going to ask Ms. Beauvais if you can give us a realistic timeline, because I think what we're shooting for is having them done by the 4th. I saw her earlier. There you are. If you can come up, Ms. Beauvais, and just let us know. I know there's a challenge with Desert View and the C building, right, which continues to be that one area that's off our system. But if you can give us an update where we're at and what our expectations should be for this installation.
Yeah, they finished all schools now, with the exception of Desert View. They start Desert View tomorrow, and the first ones they're going to do, of course, for all the freshman academy rooftop units and the A building rooftop units, because they're the easiest and fastest to get through. They've pulled another team off of another school district to help us get through Desert View in a real timely manner, but that school district shall
That's okay.
Nameless.
Give us bus
So they're
drivers from them
They're
too.
doing everything that they can, to help us, meet our goal. I'm just afraid we're not going to be able to get through all of C building. We'll have a good running start on it. But when they originally had engineered that, they had planned on putting the needlepoint bipolarization on the coils in the air handler room. Well, there's just too long of a distance for it to shoot to get to the classrooms. And our guys that are doing the installing did not feel comfortable with that. So they came to me on it, and I went back to the ones that had engineered it, and they really weren't looking at the distance that it had to go. So they're going to be installing it in each and every classroom in the ductwork, in which they have to run separate power to each unit. So it's going to take a little bit longer, but I feel real comfortable we'll have a better use of the product when we're all done. So, but the rest of the school shouldn't be any problem getting through before school starts. And then they will be working nights once school does start, so. Any questions on the rest of it?
Yeah, how long does that project usually take? Or are they estimating it? Obviously, August 4th is a question mark, probably not, but do we know how long?
Well, because it's going to be a whole different ball game, what they're going to be doing in the C building, I really can't give you an estimate on it because that part hasn't been started, so we don't know, how long it's going to take because they have to pull power from elsewhere for each and every unit. So
You can give us an update though
yeah,
for Friday?
I can
Okay.
certainly do that after we get started. We kind of have an idea how long it's going to take per classroom. So.
And all their schools are up?
All the other schools are done. The guys have been working 10-hour days, sometimes a little bit longer. They've worked several Saturdays. I see the team leaders that they had put together. I see them entering the data, which is the pre-reading and the post-readings of what they've done in every single room that they've installed it in. They're doing all that data entry on Sundays. So they've worked really, really hard on, trying to meet our deadline goal.
Mhm.
So,
Thank you, Ms. Bove. And we'll give the governing board on this next Friday report an update on kind of where we're at as soon as we get going with Desert View specifically. One thing that I feel like we're doing that has been kind of a different standard, which we talked about earlier in our mitigation layer that I'm bringing forward is actually doing weekly COVID testing, right? I gotta make sure this is clear. This is only by consent of parents. So this is volunteer. This is not something that every student needs to participate in. However, we get critical mass of pool testing. I think we're gonna do a better job of knowing who's infected and how we go about contact tracing, right, as we move forward. And I actually have Tim Leiden, who's actually part of that company, and it is, I just want to make sure this is the vendor that's working specific with Arizona Department of Health Services. They were procured by the state, so we are working with a group that's has had a track record and is going to come in and help support us as we're moving that work forward. The process works like this in the pool testing. Those that sign consent forms, right, those students who have parents who have consent would then once a week, we're probably starting that second week by the time we kind of get everything training, we have to train everyone, would be given a swab at a particular point in time during the day, and they would be put the swab in. And the idea is if you can pick your nose, you can put that. That's not the ones you got to stick up to your brain. It's but they are PSA testing, which we've heard all the nightmare what that looks like. And then they go into a pool jar. That's why they call it pool testing. So if we're all in one classroom and 4 of us have the consent form at a point in time once a week, they'll come bring the swabs. We swab, we stick them in a bottle that gets sealed and sent off, right? And they call it pool because there's no identifier of their names, right? So, but it's identified by the unit of the classroom. So when the classroom, if something comes up positive in the classroom, then those of us that have consent would then go do a rapid test as a follow-up to determine kind of all the close contact and confirmation of that. That would happen in every school, in every classroom where we have consent, and would be done weekly. The lab results, the labs that we're working with us in our requests, so they're, they are a big vendor, right? So they would get quick turnaround, so we kind of can move forward. I think it's going to help our parents feel at ease that we're actually tracing this, and a lot of our staff, right, who want to make sure that we're kind of keeping an eye on this and we're just not using symptomatic kind of visualization, but we're actually using the testing protocols as a way to kind of move this, can move forward as we can control what we can control. I have Tim here if you have any questions. He'll be more than happy to come up and speak to what they're doing if that's okay with you, Ms. Quintero.
Yes, okay, so Mr. Hernandez, Ms. Dong, Mr. Taylor.
Hi. Thank you for coming. I just have a few questions. How would the rollout actually happen? Because school's obviously right around the corner. And then the second part, the rapid testing, who does that?
Sure. So first of all, thank you, President Quintero, and the rest of the board, and Superintendent Holmes for having me here. The rollout, there's flexibility around kind of how you can roll it out across the district. One of the aspects of the program that has resonated really well with schools and districts in Arizona so far, because we've been testing in Arizona using this methodology since April of this year. And we actually, part of the DHS's program is to also pay for on-site support. So there's a local company called Spartan Medical that has 5 offices around Arizona, and including in Phoenix, and their whole job is sourcing medical professionals and sending them for short stints for different types of nursing work or other types of work. So we can bring those, and we plan to bring, and these are people that have had the background checks, they also have the qualifications to come into a school. And they can come in on test day and kind of alleviate a lot of the burden off of the teachers and members of the school community. And so we'll essentially find, Spartan will find a group of folks that will align to the schools. And as schools start making progress with getting parent consents, we'll be ready, we'll go at the pace that Superintendent Holmes and the school community kind of can go at, and we'll kind of bring it in as the school community is ready. And then in terms of the rapid test, the same kind of on-site clinical professionals would come the day after. So we kind of automatically, every school tests on Monday, let's just say. For those who have on-site support, we'll also have someone come out on Tuesday, just in case there's a positive, so that they're there. They will bring the Binex Now rapid tests that they'll get from the county health office, and they'll be ready to test if there's a positive test.
Ms. Dong, did you have a question?
But you were next.
Okay.
Has this been done in other schools already?
Yes, so we've been testing in Madison School District since early April. They were kind of our earliest adopters. And I think Superintendent Holmes has talked to Superintendent Baca, and he's been a great kind of a representative of the program. He's talked quite a bit about how the program has worked for them. Over the summer, we also tested in 3 or 4 other districts. I think it was 3 specifically. And overall, there's 8 districts, 7 plus Sunnyside, that are preparing to test district-wide in the coming weeks to start. And then probably another 20 to 25 where we're kind of educating them and answering their questions, and they're considering whether or not to test. And more broadly, we've been doing the same testing methodology since last November. We've done it in 19 different states, in more than 1,200 schools, urban, rural, all kinds of kind of different settings. And so it's pretty tested.
Okay, how well has it worked in terms of, identifying positive cases? I mean, with the PCR test, I know that one's not, completely foolproof. And then even
Sure.
then, you're led on a chase to figure out, who's got it in the classroom and who doesn't. I just want to know how that works, or how well that works.
Sure. So the pooled test, the underlying test is a PCR. It's the PCR test that Sonora Quest uses, a Perkin-Elmer test. And, but you're right, there is the chance for some false positive, false negative, but it's, the PCR test is the best we have. I'd say that an anecdote would be we tested in Baltimore City public schools across all 100 of their schools, and it was mandatory. It wasn't mandatory that every student had to participate, but every school adopted the program. When they came back in March of this past year after not having been any in-person learning, so coming from all over the city, coming back right away, there was no baseline testing except for the pooled testing. And so our positivity rate at that point had been 1% across thousands and thousands of tests, but mostly in Massachusetts. And the first week, they were 8% positivity across the whole district. That was higher than we had ever seen, but it was actually not surprising given it was kind of like a baseline test and you were measuring the incidence of COVID in their community. And by regularly testing weekly, it went from 8 to 5 to 4.5 to 3, and by the fourth week, it was down to 2, and it stayed at 2. So with the regular testing, you have a greater likelihood to catch, first of all, non-symptomatic, the 25% of people who never develop symptoms but are transmissible or contagious, and then detecting earlier in the kind of viral cycle. You have a greater percentage chance of catching them kind of when they're early in the virus and before they're contagious. And those are kind of the two benefits over just testing symptomatic. So when they already present symptoms and they're clearly contagious. So I don't know that there's any foolproof approach, but across all the places where we've tested, it does seem like first of all, overall positivity rate has been 1% over more than 100,000 tests. And so where we did see higher levels initially, it always followed that kind of like path because you're pulling out the folks until you reach kind of an equilibrium.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Sure.
This is a huge endeavor, and I just had a couple of quick questions here. I'm not sure I'm understanding who exactly is going to be giving the test to, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of students, who's going to be actually administering that test?
Right, so it's a great question. So we will, Superintendent Holmes and I were just talking about this before the meeting on doing some planning. Essentially, there will be assigned staff that come out, and on test day, they will take the supplies, the tubes and the swabs, the things that we sent to each school location that's testing. They will take those. These are not school, or they don't have to be school employees. They can be if you want, but the program is designed such that we can bring on-site support. They can manage the program for the school. They'll take the supplies. They will unbox. They will go around and make sure every classroom has, where there are consented students, a tube and swabs sufficient. And then if it's an elementary school, they're going to go around classroom to classroom. Or this is how it's typically done. There's a lot of flexibility on how a particular school would want to do it. But go around classroom to classroom and be there to observe the students as they stealth-swab 4 times in each nostril, and then they put their own swab in the tube. When the collection is finished, usually takes 5 to 10 minutes. That same person will take the swab, put the cap on, alcohol swab, and they will collect like that across all the different classrooms until they have a full box. And a courier from Sonora Quest will come to the school at a predetermined time. This person will hand the box to them, say thank you very much, and they will then take those samples back to Sonora Quest where they'll be tested, and the results will come back to the school and the district through our portal. And so all of that can happen with outside support.
Okay, yeah, you answered my second question, which is going to be the chain of command, but so I understand now that Sonora Quest is going to send couriers to come and do that. So the only question now is how, who is going to actually do it? Are we gonna bring in your folks and, you know, instead of, I don't want all the teachers to have to spend time, to do this. It's already going to interrupt their school day.
Yeah.
You know, on the days of the test, it's gonna, you know, it's gonna interrupt. But, I don't want them to have to be the ones to actually be administering the test.
Mr. Holmes?
Yeah, I envision probably a combination, relying on their staff, because we're new partnership, right? I don't know like how many, right? So those are where the details. I do see our monitors playing a role, right, in helping, you know, take this stuff to the classrooms and not having the teachers having to do that. One thing that we parallel this to is, I think it's going to be almost like the old fluoride test washing that they did back in the day, where it's going to take some time. But I think people are going to get used to it. I think it's going to be bumpy at first. I don't see the teachers having to actively manage it, but I think for the little kids, I think those first few times, they're probably going to have to take some time and make sure that they're kind of watching, assisting, just because they have the relationships, until we kind of get this a little bit smooth, just to be realistic, right?
Right, because I can see the little ones, especially the Ks, first, second, they're maybe at least K first, second, not being real compliant. You know, it's like you're gonna come at them with a stick.
Did you say 4 or did you say 2? How many?
Yeah, and so I could see it, somebody needing to really be, you know, watching what they're doing, and you know, so that's what I was just curious. So you know, if you can give us a, you know, after you've been doing this for about a month, if you come back and let us know how things are going, I'd appreciate it.
Of course. We actually engage the students. We have comic books and coloring books that talk about, our company is a biotechnology company, and so we really want to take the opportunity to engage the students on the science and kind of call them citizen scientists, and saying you're like taking control of a really important part of your health in this very crazy time that has been very tough for all these kids. And so kind of we have quick demonstration videos and fun that we had a 7-year-old, it's in one of the videos, I can pass it around, that coined the term boogers down when you put the swab in, and that kind of caught on like wildfire. So it's actually, we came in with the same thought that, like, how are you going to get a kindergartner to sit there and do 4 here and 4 here and not jam it? And
Exactly.
and actually they've adapted like incredibly in many different places with different groups of people, and so it's been really fun to watch, and it's become a great opportunity to talk about the science behind testing and what that does.
Thank you. That was very informative. Mr. Holmes?
No, I'm good. I just want to make sure you answered.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the next section is really notification, right? Once we get a positive case, Pima County is going to take a more active role to mandate that we report to them, right? Particularly in light of some confusion that's happened around, you know, quarantine. There are some mandated quarantine that will happen, right? And so we'll work with Pima County Health Department, who will be sending out those letters and assisting with kind of the compliance requirements of the law in relationship to quarantine when we have positive cases, just like we would with any other virus that's been affected. So nothing's changed there, despite the politics that have gotten involved in this, quite frankly. So we will continue to update our dashboard as we kind of get this. There are outbreak letters that Pima County has already created. I know we have a school district that's opened already, and so there's already a pattern that's been established. So that's certainly, we're not the first out of the gate, so we'll have some samples that are going to be shared with us and continue that dialogue. But Pima County Health Department will play a more active role as required by the law regarding quarantine, and will support us in those efforts in the cases that we have positive cases where we need to quarantine individuals or a whole classroom, at which point it's a connection back to the opening meeting where we, what do we do and how we do continue seamless instruction for those students. I do just want to lastly remind our governing board and that we, and to the audience, that we still have 2 options available, the 100% full-time instruction, and then we have our distance learning SOSA model. Again, it's not with a specific teacher, and I gotta make sure that it's clear why we didn't move in that direction. Has a lot to do that we still are trying to continue to staff our schools, right? And to pull teachers out, given the small amount of number, doesn't make any sense. Right now, we're up to about 47 students who have chosen that. That is an up-to-date figure. That may increase over time or may not. At which point, I know our curriculum department is continuing to work on iterating that curriculum so that it is as user-friendly for those parents that have chosen that option, because it is a much more self-paced option for them as we're moving forward, and people are taking advantage of them. But we are also seeing a lot of parents who are nervous but know that they need their kids in school, and so that's why some of these mitigation efforts are important to put in place, particularly this testing protocol.
Ms. Hernandez?
Just out of curiosity, for those that are not familiar with SOSA, is that a program that's been in place? What is the who created the content? Is it us or is it a vendor?
That's a great question. So SOSA's been around for quite a time, and it's our acronym for our Online Success Academy, which has been associated with what we call our online instruction program. Traditionally, it's been used with credit recovery and students who are short credits. A lot of our STAR students kind of share that. Sunnyside and Desert View students who may be credit short, so they'll do full-time and then pick up these more in a self-paced course. So it's been around. The curriculum is a purchase curriculum, but it's modified by groups of either the curriculum or the department or the teachers, so that it's kind of, sometimes some of those canned ones have things that are not applicable, and so it's been a modified purchase curriculum that we use. More recently, we moved with a different vendor, which is called PLP. And the reason why I mention that is that that's in its current kind of now working towards our third iteration of making sure that as we learn, and teachers who have been kind of engaged in it have said, hey, this is not working, and we make those modifications.
So is the content that the 40-some families that decided to opt into this, is it similar to what is being taught in the classroom? Obviously, it can't be the same,
yeah,
but is it the basics of what they need to know that year? Or?
Yeah, so it's still aligned to the grade level standards, so it's all content that's aligned. It's just not the same curriculum that we have right in place. Ours just kind of requires a lot more teacher direction. So for mathematics, for example, in third grade, you may be covering, becoming fractions. In our case, we have our curriculum that teaches it a certain way. This will still cover the same content, but not with the same materials that we use.
So if a student falls behind because it's self-paced, who do they reach out to?
Usually in that particular case, they'll reach back out to the principal, see if there's any kind of support systems that we have. The challenge, again, with this is it's really geared towards more a student that can stay on track, right, or a parent, right? And so, unfortunately, we don't have a good alignment. And so as we're moving forward, we may have to create some support systems for those students, but it's going to look a little bit more different than what it did in the past. In other words, we'll see what's starting to emerge and maybe tie some tutors to it. It may not be a live instructor, but I can foresee us compensating individuals who would like to kind of help with some tutoring after their day is done.
I think that's a good idea if we get more students who are interested.
Okay.
Can we make sure that we're communicating that before they enroll and after they enroll?
Yes, I can do that, because honestly, we're having these conversations in real time, right? And so even this conversation is kind of an idea that just surfaced just as we're talking, but it seems like a realistic option, right? And so I think I feel very comfortable saying, hey, what talking to our curriculum department and their principals and communicating, hey, if people are falling behind, let's find ways of compensating people who want to support these students, right?
Sorry, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about in terms of what can they expect as far as support before they opt into this option and after,
yep.
So they know who to contact.
They are required to meet with their principal before.
Okay.
So that's a requirement. We're not letting them just sign up.
Gotcha.
So yeah, all of the students have to be funneled through the principal, and they have a dialogue with them prior.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And so, I know we've gone through a series of questions, and so moving forward, I want to formalize kind of our mitigation efforts, although their iterations are no longer legally required. I just think in the spirit of collaboration as a board and superintendent, this is why I made this an action item to ask your approval of our current iteration of our mitigation plan, Because as we know, things may change, right? And as we do that, we'll make the necessary modifications if they need to come in real time, and I'll come back to the board if anything is necessary. But we've been iterating on the fly, and we'll continue to do so in the spirit of making sure that our students and staff are safe.
So do you want a motion to approve the mitigation plan as submitted or to remain flexible?
I think to approve the mitigation plan is submitted. I think any iteration of that motion may get muddy. Because I always bring it back to you guys either way, right? So, but no, sometimes we'll move on the fly.
Just one more thing. Can we get an update how things are going with the mitigation plan?
Yeah. So
Maybe, I mean, you would probably know when that would be best, but at least a few times during the year, just because of the variant. I mean, it is a real issue, and I'm concerned about our entire community having everyone show up, and students, we don't know if they're going to show up with masks, and I understand that our employees are also might feel uncomfortable, but they're still showing up. So
yes.
I think that would be helpful.
Absolutely. We will do that. We'll start the next board meeting after we start. Just give a quick and broad. We always do a broad update, so we'll give a introduction to how things are looking, but we'll be more formal on an update on the mitigation specifically.
Thank you.
Ms. Dong?
I move that we approve the mitigation plan as submitted.
I second the motion.
Roll call?
Ms. Dong?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Aye.
Ms. Hernandez?
Aye.
Ms. Nunez?
Aye.
Ms. Quintero?
Aye. Thank you for all your hard work. Equitable grading updates.
I'm going to ask Ms. Benton if she can give us an update on what the committee has been working on. I know there's a lot of interest in this and kind of how we're starting and what's taking shape.
Good evening, President Quintero, governing board members, Superintendent Holmes. I'm chuckling because I'm just putting some final touches on the equitable grading for the teachers they're using it this week as well. So just wanted to give you an update on where we're at with this project. This is a big undertaking, and what it's going to look like. I want to show you a little bit of a timeline. I had originally intended to bring some of the teachers from the committee to present tonight. And then they reminded me that tomorrow's their first day back at 8 in the morning, and I said, fine, okay, fine. So I let them off the hook this time, but they will be showing up in other meetings. First, I wanted to really drive home that this work is not happening in a silo, that the work around equitable grading and really making those changes is in service to our mission statement and in service to our graduate profile. This idea of identity, purpose, and agency, and what that looks like when a student crosses our stage, what does that mean? And as we really build those competencies, how do some of our systems play in? One of them is grading. So as you well know, formative assessment is a big primary strategy that we use to move the work forward. Interestingly, the way a lot of this work surfaced, that we actually took it to the place where we're doing work on it, came from teachers themselves. Many teachers started approaching and saying, you know, we really believe in this formative work, but it doesn't really match what you're asking us to do on the report cards or what you're asking us to put in grade books. And they're right. They're 100% right. We're asking them to serve two masters, to silo two different things. So we started a committee that is really basing the work on Joe Feldman. The book is in the back that I have over there, and I have additional copies if anybody's interested, around equitable grading and what does that look like. I have since learned from some of our national partners, there are a lot of districts nationwide who are beginning to engage in this work. Some of our colleagues from Austin that we've worked with in the past have a high school group that we're now talking with, which is nice because you don't have to recreate the wheel. You know, you're constantly talking and figure out what works, and that gives collegiality to our teachers as well. The equitable grading work, we're basing it on these three pillars. This idea of accuracy, bias resistant and motivational. Is it accurate? Does it actually reflect what a student knows rather than this kind of commodity of points, this collection of points? And is it actually accurate to what students know? Many traditional grading practices have become a way that we manage behavior, to be real honest. And there's so much bias built into assumptions that we make, and so much subjectivity when we're looking at bias resistant. And it really requires us to approach the work very vulnerably and to really come into it. Grading is a very personal thing for teachers. And so we spent the entire spring not changing the actual practice, but understanding why is grading inequitable. I mean, it's traditional. We've all, even I'm old, and we've all had similar grading practices that may look different on a report card, but are really grounded in the same traditional biases that are in play. The third one, motivational, is really looking at what motivates kids. Do Fs really motivate kids to do better? Probably not, right? And how do we, going back to the graduate profile around agency, is kids thinking about their thinking, purpose, in building out those competencies? How do we blend those intrinsic motivation pieces so kids see that school and the work that they're doing on a day-to-day, I mean, they're with us 6-7 hours a day. How does that really impact this? And it's not just a checkoff box. It's not just a collection of points. Easy to say, hard to do. So we have a committee. In the spring, I just sent out district-wide. Anyone who's interested, I've been around a long time, served on many grading report card committees. I think I even said to Mr. Holmes, you know, I'm hoping I can get like 25 people. Like, I'm hoping. Oh no, I started out with 120. I was like, yes. Wow. When it came down to the logistics of really, teachers were tired in the spring, we ended up with a very solid group of 79 members who came every week. I mean, virtually. We met weekly. We really dove into it. They all have the book. We spent a lot of time reading and talking. What does that look like? Interestingly, all my sites were represented and all grade levels and contents. It just random. I didn't ask for it that way. It just, the interest came. Some more than others. Some may had a single member, but there was just across, I mean, art teachers, I mean, Spanish teachers, ELD teachers, ex-ed teachers. We met over the spring, and we really decided early on that our focus would not be on making the changes. We didn't want to solutionize this. We didn't want to just create the fix. We really wanted to understand what is really at the heart of equitable grading. If we're really going to be courageous and say we're really going to look at practice and we're really going to dig in and do that, then we have to understand it. We have to come to a common place. So we spent the entire spring doing that. We had a different timeline that we thought a couple weeks doing that and we'll be ready to go. Really, I cannot tell you what a great committee that is. Just their willingness to be vulnerable, engage, and say, man, I do that and I never thought about that. Just really strong. Then in the summer, we had about 49 to 50 participants continue in the summer. And the goal of the summer committee was really, we had done some work kind of just deciding where do we want to start? Because there's a lot of things that, you know, it's one of those things you turn over the rock and it was like, whoa. So there are a lot of elements that we have to address. It really came down to what can we handle right now? I talked to them honestly and openly saying, this is going to be a really tough year. Do we want to just spend the year getting ready? And they were absolutely not. We have to start now. So then I kind of paired them back to say, okay, let's try and start small. So they each decided on two pieces, the K-5 and then the 6-12, because we have two reporting systems that are in play would work. And the summer teams really built out all of the slides and the talking points that teachers will be getting at their sites and pre-service. And what was really important to them, which makes me so proud of them, is they were like, this can't be the district said. They feel strongly that they want to be the ones giving voice to the work. that they want to be the ones having conversations with their colleagues, even though they're nervous about that in many ways, because it's not like everybody's like, oh, yippee. You know, they're not under that impression. But really the ownership that they have towards this work. So here's our short-term goals. Short-term being like starting tomorrow in the fall, you know. These are the two small changes that will really have a big impact in changing the mindset. So for K-5, which currently operates off of a standards-based report card, although that word carries more than the underneath piece, we have a lot of work to do. They're really looking at two things. One will be excluding extra credit from grades. The second one will be excluding homework from grades. Now, that doesn't mean excluding homework. That doesn't mean we're saying kids would be so excited, no homework. It means that the grades for homework is practice. And so if that's practice, then how do we legitimize mistakes? How do we legitimize where my learning is and not penalizing kids for that space? So for elementary and the K-5, those are the two lifts that they will be sharing with their colleagues this week. 6-12, they operate on more of a standard, a standard reporting system that is a traditional 0 to 100 point scale, averaged, et cetera. Interestingly, our sixth graders, so if you're in an elementary school, K-5 is on one report card and sixth grade's on the 6-12 report card, even if they're in an elementary school. So the 6-12 are doing two changes. One of them is excluding extra credit for points, so it's not part of grading. And the other one is implementing minimum grading. And minimum grading in short summary is currently you have a 100-point scale. And of a 100-point scale, 0 to 59% is an F. So this much of the scale is an F. And then you go 59 to 69 is a D, so on and so forth. And so just the inequity and the imbalance of the scale is the weight of an F is huge. Like, you know, we have this much space to get an F and this much space to get a B. And so really changing minimum grading simply means the grading scale starts at 50. There are no zeros in that scale. There are no, you're not gradating an F. Like an F is still an F. Now, we have worked with Frank McCormick in Power School so that it's not like grades don't matter, therefore, you know, it's really this message of how are we getting to that intrinsic piece where a student who doesn't turn an assignment in, there's a code that will hold that in place. So the parent still sees, when you go to Power School, you still see, my student has an NHI and not handed in, and it's holding that space. At the end of time, not the end of time, but the end of whatever that semester time is or quarter time, if that grade goes to the F, it goes to the 50 instead of the 0, which makes the student have the ability to catch back up. Because if I get 1 0 over here and I don't have very many grades, it doesn't matter if I get 100%. I can't get out of that F. And so kids are like, I'm done. I already have the F. And so there's a mindset shift in there that happens. We're going to have to do a lot of talking about this, and to students as well. Because sometimes our AP students or our Sun students, they know the game of collecting points and that point commodity. And so that's very real to us to talk to students about what this is. I have some great audio of students, and I talk to them at the student advisory, of students being really honest. There are students talking about, they know the game and they know what they want is their grades to reflect learning, but they also understand the system that's there. So just really interesting pieces. So while these are two of many that we need to lift, they're big. I mean, and they're gonna cause some ripples. But what's really important is that they understand the why. This is about bias. This is about inequity in grading. This is about how are we motivating kids. If our graduate profile says this, then we have to align our systems. As uncomfortable and painful as that's going to be, some bumps along the road. So our long-term goals are this. We're going to move this fall, where I'm going to reopen the committee. Again, I'll keep existing members for all who want to stay, and so far that's about at 100%, to open it to anyone else who wants to join, because I promise you, after we float these two ideas out, I will have new members, who are going to want to join, which is great. I mean, that's what I want, is that voice in there. Then we will also be working to bring on students. Student voice is incredibly important in this work. And so we have already some students who have conversations around it, but I want to bring them in a formal way. And then I want to bring in parents. I probably won't bring the parents in right at the beginning because there's a lot of teacher talk that gets really acronymy and, all of those pieces, right, Ms. Quintero? But we will have parents come in so that the focus is in the fall. We identify what are the changes, how are they going to look, and what's the policy recommendations that we need to bring to you that are formal policy changes for Sunnyside. The goal is that we do that in the fall and have those recommendations and changes identified by December so that we can spend the spring really doing the rollout, really talking to parents, really talking to teachers, really figuring out how do we make Power School do what we need it to do, changing physical report cards and progress reports. There's a big lift in the mechanics of that I want to make sure we leave enough time so that teachers don't feel like the summer is like, these are smaller changes, but to change your entire grade book, that's big. So our goal would be in the spring then to be able to really work on the logistics and put legs underneath some of that work. And so that's our plan.
Okay, Mr. Taylor, Ms. Hernandez, Ms. Nunez. 1, 2, 3.
No, it's just a comment. I want to thank you all for your work on this, and in terms of the minimum grading. See, I love that so much because prior to tomorrow, there was so much room to be a failing student, and now it'll be equal with every other grade and more opportunity, I think, to get that grade up. So I really thank you for that and for coming up with that.
Of course, thank you.
Yeah, I just also want to thank you and the entire team. This is a really big undertaking. This is something that's been in place forever, and we don't really have, before tomorrow, we didn't really have, everyone had their own system, and students it would also cause confusion, I remember as a student. And this is something that's super exciting to me as well, because it also focuses on comprehension of the student and not just trying to get to a grade. So I appreciate it. And then just one suggestion.
Absolutely.
When we're reaching out to students, if we can try to reach out to students outside of the normal students I reach out to, just because they more or less tend to have the same, they're excelling and
yes.
They're in all of these groups, and I think it would be really important to me to get insight on students who are coming from different areas.
Totally agree. I agree. And there's some of the teachers that are on the committee now who, actually in the spring, they ended up giving chapter 3, particularly in Feldman's book, they gave it to their high school students, and then they had discussions around it, and that's exactly what, because it was a class of 35 kids, and then what is that conversation? So that is going to be really powerful. So I totally agree.
And then one last comment, I really appreciate you sending out the invitation to everyone, just because we're making a really big change at the district level, and then everyone can have a say in how we're going to change things. And I know that you mentioned I thought we already had students taking part in the conversations.
We have had some, but I just didn't have them formally identified as a committee. But yes, we had kids comments.
Gotcha, yeah.
Yes.
And I just want to say I really appreciate you also including parents as well.
Good. Yeah.
So thank you. I'm really excited about the work.
Thank you. It'll be fun. I'm sure you guys will hear about it, though. Just so you know.
We'll get phone calls.
I know.
Just to piggyback off of what they said, and working in this area for the last few years, I'm very excited for our kids and for our teachers, and I know it's a little scary, especially for maybe some people that have been in the district for a really long time, but I've seen how positive it is and how great it can be. And I just want to say thank you for being so brave to take on that culture shift and that really growth mindset, because I know it's such a hard thing to do, and I really appreciate that. And then my question is, the committee, are they rolling, like, the things that you guys have already discussed, are they giving that to, like, all their teachers, or how is that getting?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so what we ended up doing, because then we were like, okay, this is massive now to message this. And while I had representation from all sites, like in some sites, I had 10 people, and in some sites I had 1. In some sites I had their leader or their coach, some sites I didn't. So it's a very mixed piece. So what we ended up as a committee deciding to do is we basically built 2 slide decks with a script, and then screencast for the K-5. 612 didn't want the screencast, but K-5 have a screencast going through them. So if the committee member who belongs to that school isn't super confident either just among their colleagues, or that just don't want that role yet, their leader, even if they weren't a part of the committee, has the screencast and the rollout that spends a lot of time talking about the why. It doesn't just go to those 2 pieces. It goes through the pillars. It goes through the why. So that will go out, and then what we've asked sites to do is identify somewhere during their pre-service schedule a period of time where they can present that to their staff. They're doing them in different ways. Desert View High School is doing carousels where the teachers are moving to different groups. Some of them are presenting them and then sending to their departments to have further conversations. So it really left it to the building. Where the buildings where we don't have strong support, then either myself or I have a steering committee of 5 others that will help support that. We have for 6th grade, because 6th grade's tricky because of the elementary, so those principals have a lot to understand. So what we asked them to do is focus on the K-5, and then Frank McCormick and Veronica Ortega built in 2 sessions during pre-service where they will talk to the 6th grade teachers are invited, and we'll record it. That, because the 6th grade one actually will go through all secondary, so we have that for people who need to hear it again, or you know how this is, in the beginning of school, it'll be like, yeah, I got it, and then when quarter 1 comes, they're gonna be like, what do I do? So, yeah. Yes. Yes. So I think we'll have to clarify a lot of times. It's really just beginning the conversation. And just so you all know, because you will get calls, I promise you, that's part of the info item, is really what we purposely did not select something that required a policy change up front, because we need to grapple with this. We need to wrestle with this a little bit. There's a lot of loose in this tight where the department can say, okay, what does that mean for art? What does that mean for band? What does that mean for PE? What does that mean for Algebra 1? So that they have some space. They're just hanging on to these big beginning constructs. So
I so appreciate that, then dropping everything in people's laps, and then there's so many gray areas and nobody knows, like, everyone's like,
yeah.
What do we do? So that I appreciate how much time you've taken into really thinking about the steps and how thorough you've been. So thank you.
Thank you. It's been a great committee. They've been outstanding.
So they all get bonuses, right?
Absolutely. I did pay them though, just for the record. They were on a paid committee.
I appreciate all the work, and I'm excited about this because it's going to be so mind-blowing.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
That'll be good.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
This is great. I feel like this is just continuing what we've been doing as far as the progress and the road we're taking for our students, and making sure that they're all treated the same and treated equitably. You know, all the bias and all those other things we've been working on, this just really is a huge part of that. It's such a huge part of that.
Kind of makes it real.
It does. It really makes it real. So, yeah, and the fact that, you know, it was stated that you're including so many people in the decision-making and letting them know that, you know, there's still room for everybody to put input in.
Mm-hmm.
There's still rooms for changes here and there as you're working it through, and it's not like set in stone. And thank you for bringing it as an informational item for the board.
Just want to get you ready.
Yeah. Appreciate that, Mark.
Yeah.
This is fantastic, thank you.
So this is an ongoing discussion.
Yes, it will be. And we will, that's one thing Mr. Holmes did ask, is that as we move this forward, and I'll bring the committee in as well to give some, I think it's important for them also to give those updates as we go along so that their colleagues also see the progression, you know, of the work. So I appreciate the audience for them as well.
This is great, thank you.
Thank you.
Another bonus.
Dr. Bergman and Mr. Encinas can chime in as well.
I'll just chime in if I
It never changes. President Cotero, members of the board, Superintendent Holmes, and members of the audience. Mr. Encinas and I are bringing forward the classroom site from Prop 301 one-time, I don't know if we like to use bonus. Stipend, it's a stipend, yes, stipend. As you read in the description that Mr. Encinas prepared, the Department of Ed informed the school districts that there was a surplus. Imagine that, surplus of revenue in the classroom and site fund. And so the expectation was from ADE is that that surplus would be distributed this year to all eligible certified staff in the 21-22 school year. And so we did talk to SEA President Ms. Schroeder, thank you, and shared the information and proposed how we'd like to move forward with this. Being that we have numerous incentives, you know, one for being for retention and recruitment. They have their normal pay for performance, you know, that we do in August and September that they earned last year in Prop 301. The proposal is splitting the $2,000 that will be allocated to each certified employee be done in 2 payments. One in October, and when Mr. Encinas started plotting it out, we were like, okay, they're gonna get a check every Friday in the month of October. And being that the $1,000 of the 2 would be done in October, and we already have the dates for exactly when we want that to happen, the 29th. Happy Halloween.
retreat.
You know, and then the second installment would happen April 1st. And we could say, April Fools, you're getting $1,000. You know, so for reals, you know, that they're going to be the allocation. So, every individual who is on the certified salary schedule who typically receives 301 would qualify for these payments. So we're bringing this forward for your approval so that we can then move forward. In HR today, we talked about all the planning and pieces that we had to put into place to ensure that these payments are done in a timely manner so that the business office can then proceed with creating the paychecks. Questions?
Ms. Hernandez?
For those of us, or anyone who's listening who might not understand how the funding works, is there any leftover money? And is there anything else that anyone needs to know, and how is it going to be rolled out?
Good question. Mr. Encinas will address that.
Time to chime in, huh?
Yeah.
The Classroom Site Fund receives its revenues from the state of Arizona, I think through, part of it is sales tax, part of it is through the land that they sell or lease. And they had and some revenues from sales tax. And they had more than projected revenues this past year. So they identified that for this coming year, we are receiving $733 per student. Of that $733, $192 is attributable to the surplus that they had last year. So that those revenues then are allocated to each school district based on their student count. So based on our 100th day, they'll be allotting us money, and we estimate that that'll generate somewhere between $11 to $12 million. On a normal year, of the funds that we receive, we've been distributing to teachers under bucket number 1, bucket number 2, bucket number 3, about $9 million a year. And fortunately, we cannot be accused of holding back money like other school districts have been accused of, and then later have to explain why they didn't do it. We've been able to manage our funds and then distribute them to our teachers in a manner that both ensures that the funds are going to the teachers and that we also may retain a small portion to make sure that we have some cash balance to forward to go into the new year. This year, after having, I think, 1 year we had, but 6 years ago, about $2 million of cash surplus. That cash surplus has gone down to about $300,000 this ending year. So next year's about $11 to $12 million. We anticipate distributing a major portion of it, and project maybe retaining back $1 million as ending cash in all 3 buckets to work into the new year. So we're managing the fund correctly, equitably, and I think the program has been distributing the funds in a correct manner to our staff. And we also, with the changes in the law, that no longer are they 3 buckets. It's 1 bucket for numerous purposes, including hiring additional certified staff or instructional staff, support staff. That funds can be used for those purposes also, in addition to what it was in the past. So they expanded the definition and allowable uses of the revenues. So we look forward to doing that, and it'll be a trick or treat and a April Fool's Day.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Anyone want to make a motion?
I move that we approve the payment of a one-time Prop 301 for fiscal year 22, $2,000 stipend as presented.
I second the motion.
Roll call?
Ms. Dong?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Aye.
Ms. Hernandez?
Aye.
Ms. Nunez?
Aye.
Ms. Quintero?
Definitely aye.
Enjoy your money.
Thank you. Suggestion for future agenda items? Ms. Dong?
I'd just like in the future, an agenda item on board communication and just how, and board and / district communication, just the different things and how we distribute information so that we can all be on the same page. And we get a ton of great information, and I'd like to see us continuing that, and then maybe adding a couple little things here and there that I would like to see. And then, I don't know, if any of the other board members have other things that they would like to see. So I think it'd be great if we could all just, being in the same room, all talk together about board and district communication.
I would like to add to our future agenda items if nobody else has anything. I just want to reschedule our retreat and have that on the next agenda so we can pick the 2 dates we can choose from.
Very good.
No unfinished business, so anybody want to make a motion?
I move that we adjourn.
I second.
Roll call?
Ms. Dong?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Aye.
Ms. Hernandez? Ms. Nunez?
Aye.
Ms. Quintero?
Aye. Good night, everyone. Thank you.